Hi viewers and welcome to the channel, and today we're going to be looking at making this ring here. And what I've done is imported SVG and mapped it to a curved surface and removed the material from there. We're going to be using the curves, draft and part workbench for this. So this is a new workbench that we're installing the curves workbench to allow us to do this. And I'm going to be taking you through importing a pattern from Inkscape as a SVG, refining that pattern using the draft tools, using an array to repeat the pattern across the surface, and then attaching that pattern to a curved surface and removing material from there. Now I've taken two stages to doing this. There's a very simple stage where I've actually created just this ring out of a tube and created the curves, etc., and that uses the same methods in there, attaching a sketch to a curved surface. Then we get a bit more complex and adding this pattern in here using the array. And at any point you can stop. If you just watch the first part of the video, that will show you how to map a simple sketch around there, and then if you watch the second part, which is all in one video, that will show you how to import the SVG, remove parts of the SVG so we can determine a repeating pattern in there using an array to repeat that pattern. That's all done in the draft workbench, and then using that, converting to a sketch and placing it along the surface and doing our boolean operations along there. If you like this video, please hit a like and also subscribe to the channel. I also have a Ko-Fi site where you can actually donate to my contributions to the community, and that's at ko-fi.com/mang0. So for this tutorial we're going to be using secondary workbench in here. So we're going to go out to the tools, add-on manager, and to install this, if we come down for the workbenches and look for curves and install that one, then we'll have that workbench there that deals with the curves and be able to match sketches upon faces that are curved, etc. So I've already got that installed, and the first thing we need to do is I'm going to actually map this around a ring. So I'm going to create basically a piece of jewellery. So I'm going to map a Celtic band around a piece of jewellery. And to do that, I first need the ring. So I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to drop down to the part workbench. And I can use a tube if so desired, but I'm going to use a cylinder. And I'm going to click on the cylinder and just change that radius to about 30 millimeters along with the height. Let's zoom out a bit. So that's our external cylinder, and now we need a cylinder that comes inside here that we can boolean out. So I'm going to click on that cylinder, go to edit and duplicate selection. Let's create a secondary cylinder that I'm going to use for the internals, and I'm going to change that radius to something like 25 millimeters. And the idea is to create a ring shape by removing the internal from the external, and we can do that by clicking on the one that we want to keep, the one we want to move, the internal, and using the make a cut of the two selections, or come up to part, boolean and cut. And that's the basic ring object there, as simple as that. Now we want to sketch a face on here. I really want to take this ring and make it more like a ring, so curve off these corners, etc. And I'm going to do that with the curves workbench. So we'll jump over to the curves workbench. This is the one we've just installed, and looking at this, I'm going to use this face here. Now I'm going to come over to here to these tools, and there's a number of tools here that deals with curves and curve elements, including B-splines, surfaces, etc. And we'll get to those in future videos. But I'm going to use this tool here, map a sketch on the surface, or if I go to surfaces, sketch on surface and click that, and we'll get an object here. So sketch on surface. Now within that, if we open that up, we'll see a sketch. And we can double click on that sketch. And what this is this surface has now been unraveled and placed as construction geometry on a new sketch. So anything we do in here will be placed on the surface. So I'm going to just hide that ring for a second, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to place a slot across this surface, and you see the reasons why in a minute. So I've placed a slot on there. I'm going to just move it down, and I'm going to get it around about centered and just put some constraints to keep it away from this side to about 20 millimeters, and the same on this side. So that's away from that side, but there's a bit of gap in there, because what will happen when I click on close, you can see how that's mapped around there. Now we've got our cut invisible, and you can see what we've got there is the sketch has been placed across that surface, and now we can do operations with the sketch on surface here. And to do that, you click on the sketch on surface, which is basically the transformed sketch that's been placed around there, and we can use the fill extrudes, fill faces, offset and thickness. So the fill faces actually makes that a solid. So hitting true on that and clicking off, that will make that a solid. You can see how that's been made a solid. Now if I just come over to the cut and hide that, there you can see the face that's been placed upon there. Let's bring the cut back and click back on the sketch on surface, and I want to create that as a thickness, so I'll make that 5 mil thick. So there you go, so let's create that as a 5 mil thickness. Now if we wanted to, we can actually send that inwards, so -5, like so, and we can use the offset if we so desire as well. So we've got offset there, and what that just does is it offsets that thickness from the edge of our geometry. So I've sent that inwards now, so it's gone beyond the face by 1 mil inwards. I'm not going to be using that, and I'm going to make the thickness outwards. And now what I'm going to do is boolean away that ring from the inner ring, and that's as simple as coming into the part workbench and clicking the surface that I want to keep, which is the sketch on surface, clicking on the object that I want to remove, holding down Control, which is the cut, and using the cut of 2 shapes, the same as we did before. Now I've got a nice ring shape that I can now use this surface and repeat upon there, place a sketch on there, and start removing or padding that up from there, and then doing the boolean operations again. I'm just going to quickly save that. Now what I'm going to do is place a sketch on this surface. Now I want some kind of Celtic pattern along here. Now what I've done is gone off to the internet and found myself an image for that, and if I go into the image I can show you that. So I'm just going to go into the image and just open image view. So I'm just showing you this image from here, and downloads, and I've got the Celtic band.jpg there, and this is a very simple band. You can find it on the internet. Extremely simple band, and I'm going to convert that into Inkscape to an image that I can use. So I'm going to convert that to vector and import that in. Now I've got videos on my site for importing vectors into geometry, and the best one for that is 4-part series of creating a logo with SVG vectors, and that will go into depth of how to use Inkscape's trace bitmap tool in there. Now I'm just going to use that for this one as well. So I'm going to open up Inkscape. And from there, what I'm going to do is import that image in, trace the bitmap, and export it back out. So if I go File, Import, and I want my Celtic band, open that. I'm going to take the defaults, I'm not going to use the smooth. Okay, that. So that's there now. And what we need to do, I'm just going to get rid of this window over there so I can show you whereabouts that is. Need to select the image and go to Path and Trace Bitmap. And I'm going to be using the brightness steps because there's only two brightnesses in here, there's black and white. So I can bring this down to 2 scans. Well, we've got the outside as well, which is the background. But I'm going to bring this down to 2 scans and I'm going to remove the background from there. That will remove the grey. I'm going to take off smoothing and make sure stack scans is on as well. I do go into more detail in this in my other video about building logos, so you can get more of introduction of how to do that there. So if I OK that, you'll see we've got the update there. And I'm just going to close that. And you can see now we've changed the selection. The selection has gone down to the actual knotwork rather than the selection outside. And what's actually happened, if we zoom in and go to Object and Objects, so we can see the objects here. Let's make this a bit easier to have a look. We've got the original image here, which is been selected there. I don't want that, so I can delete that. I hit the delete key and let's get rid of that. And we've got our group of paths. So there's 2 paths here. Let's get rid of that. There's 2 paths here that make up this image, this vector. I'm just going to bring this out so we can see what we're doing. Now I'm going to click on the group and right click and ungroup that. So now we've just got 2 paths. Now if I hit the select and transform objects and just remove those, you can see I've got a grey and a black. So I'm just going to get rid of the grey and leave myself with that path there. Don't have to worry about the layer, that's fine. Now positioning this will, when you import it into FreeCAD, it will position it at a certain place. So if you think of this is the point of origin 0, 0, it's the same in FreeCAD. So we go back to FreeCAD. And I don't need that anymore. And if we go out to View and toggle the axis cross will show us the point of our origin. So that's 0, 0 there. And if I'll go around to the top, you can see where that is. So 0, 0 is there. So when I import this, it's going to actually appear in this section here, which is fine. We can move that. If I place this SVG here, then the point of origin will be there, be in the center of that SVG, and that will place it in the center there. So the SVG will come up here. But we don't want that. We want it to be placed there. And you see the reasons why in a minute. So that's good. So I'm going to save that. Save as. I've already got a vector in here called Celtic band SVG. I'm going to save over that. And replace that. And that's everything that we need to be done in Inkscape. Let's come back over. And I'm going to go up to File and Import. And I'm going to import that SVG now. That was in our downloads, Celtic band SVG, and open that up. I want to select SVG as geometry, import SVG, and that will import the SVG into our file, and there'll be a number of paths that's imported into there. And this is where we've got to do a little bit of editing with the paths, Because at the moment, if you click on each of these paths, we've got the separate paths. This makes it a lot easier to look for repeating geometry as well. One path that we need to get rid of is this one here, which is almost like the background path that's been placed over here to give it colour. So I just delete that. You can see we've got a better SVG import there. Let's zoom in. And what I'm going to do is look at this and look for a repeating geometry. So I can see this repeats across here. And this one repeats, and this one repeats, and the same here and here. So I can take, actually let's do this one, this side, this one here, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one here, because this repeats across here. So what I want to do is start removing geometry from here. So I want to remove that one. I'm going to hit Control and just remove the geometry like so. And hit Delete. That's got rid of those. And I want to keep. Don't want that one. Let's get rid of that. And that's the same as there, so let's get rid of that one. So when this goes across, it should replicate. So all of these I want to get rid of. I'm not going to bother about these end parts because I don't really need those. I don't really want those. I just want a repeating pattern across there. So just hit Control, selected all those and hit Delete. So that's given me this pattern here. And I can check that pattern by clicking the path and this part and this path, holding down the shift, selecting them all, and I'm going to combine these together. So I'm going to come over to the draft, and this is where our workbenches really flow together and we can use them to our advantage. So in the draft I've got my paths selected, so holding down shift, selecting all of those, and I'm going to come into the upgrade. And this upgrades those paths into a more complex object. It's also available on the modifications and upgrade. When I click that, it converts it to a compound object. So now I can transform that and transform that as one. I don't want to transform it yet. Just going to hit OK. Now I want to actually attach a repeating pattern across here. Now I'm still going to use the draft in here to do this because I need to make that pattern repeat. And the first thing I need to know is basically where are my bounds on this ring to repeat that pattern, because I want to keep within this height. So we need to go over to the curves workbench and just add a sketch to here so I can work out how to repeat this pattern across here. So just drop down to the curves workbench and we'll see that our grid is still available. We can get rid of that if we so desire on the draft workbench, but we'll leave that grid there. I'm going to come in to this face here and add a sketch to it. So using the map sketch on the surface, you can see the sketch on surface has been created. Now I'm going to go into the map sketch and I'm going to show you a little trick in here. This geometry is construction geometry, so it won't be shown outside the sketch. So if I come in here and if I was outside the sketch, close that and just show that sketch, so I click on the sketch, pressing space, you can see it's not being shown. So what I do, if I'm using an external sketch that's outside of this sketch or external geometry, I take these two lines, which are construction geometry, change them to normal geometry. So using the toggle, the toolbar or selected geometry to from construction mode, that gives you guidelines. So when you close this, you can see those guidelines there, which is exactly what we want. So if I click on top, you can see those guidelines there all ready to go. And I no longer need this ring, so I'm going to hide that. And also you'll see those, because I've placed guidelines on them, they will appear on that sketch on surface. So we're just going to hide that as well, otherwise we may get a bit confused. This means that I can take this compound object and line it up with these lines. Now to do that, I will need to do some scaling. So we can't scale that compound object at the moment. I'm going to use the draft workbench again, because it's got a lot of tools that are useful for what I'm doing in here. And I'm just going to position myself to the top, and what we're going to do is take this and place it in here and scale it. So first I'm going to move this. So I'm going to use the move tool. It's also available on the modifications and move. It's here on the toolbar. Click on the compound, click on the move, and now I just want to find a edge to move. So I can either use that vertex there or that edge. I can click anywhere on here, but I like to basically pick it up from the place by clicking and then just moving my mouse about. I haven't held down my mouse, I've just clicked. I'm using the shift and moving the screen down like so. And I can place this wherever I want in here. So I'm going to, because I want it repeating across here, I'm going to place it for the time being here. And let's move that up. And I'm going to create a clone of this so I can resize it. So modifications, clone, or I can get to it on the toolbar, which is over here. So that's made a clone of that object. And now I've got the scale here. So I'm just going to come into compound and just hide that compound and work on my clone. So open up the scale, and I'm thinking we're going to need to go about 0.5 on the scale on the X and 0.5 on the Y, so halving it. And that looks good. And I'm just going to quickly come into the placement and the position, and I'm just going to edit that. So I want to bring it down on the Y. Now that is looking good. 29 on the Y, and on the X I can bring this over here and just make some slight amendments to that. So that's good, that's in position now. I'm quite pleased with that. What I want to do now is repeat this pattern across here. Now to do that, I'm going to use the array, which is available from the draft. So I'm going to make an array of these compound objects going across. I first want to figure out from here how far away I need to translate this to place it into this slot here so the pattern repeats. So take that compound and I'm going to duplicate that up. So edit, duplicate selection. And I just want compound 1 there, I don't want the compound. So okay that. And I'm just going to take a note of the X here. And we're going to use the up and down arrow keys. I'm just going to move this from -7 all the way up to 7. So we know that we've got to add plus 15 on there to get that into position. So now we've worked that out, we can use the array. So I don't need that compound, that was just for experimenting, figuring out how far I've got to translate across. Click on compound 2 and we're looking for the array options. So it's available here. Let's create various types of arrays. It's also available in the modification, array tools, and array. Now I don't want anything along the y-axis, so I'm looking down here to see my axes. Don't want anything along the y, so I only want one along there, and I want one along the z, and I'm just going to go for 6 along here. I can change that if I so want. It's quite easy to change. Now the intervals is the important one, which was the 15mm. And everything is fine. So I'm looking at 15mm along the X. I'm looking at 6 along the X. So that's okay that now. And you see how that's repeating. Now this is fine. I haven't gone all the way across, which I want to do. As you can see, let's zoom out a bit. I can just come in here and modify that. So click on the array, and we can go down to the count. So I'm going to double this count. Now I can't double the count there. I have to come down and do the number along the X. I can place that to 12. And what will happen, I need to edit, refresh on there. See, I've got 12 in there. And I think I can get away with another one in there. So along the X, let's do 13 along the X. And edit, refresh, or Control R there. So we've got that going across there like so. So the next thing I'm going to do is convert that array to a sketch. Now let's bring this down a little bit so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to click on the array, and using the modifications and draft a sketch, or using the convert bidirectionally between draft objects and sketches, we can use that to then convert that array to a sketch. So there it's converted. I can hide that array, and now we can import that sketch into our mapped surface. So I'm going to go into my mapped surface, and that's not imported at the moment. I'm going to remove these lines. Well, I'm going to convert them to construction geometry. So before they were construction geometry, convert them back so we can see them outside the sketch, and now I'm going to convert those back again. So now when we hit close, that's all gone. So let's go back into this map sketch. Now there is a way of mapping this sketch to that surface without doing it this way. Apparently map that sketch on the curves workbench to the surface, but I found that it would crash my computer. I've tried it on a more powerful computer and it just locks it up. So what you would normally do is come into the curves workbench like so, and I'm going to bring back the cut and that sketch on surface there. And what you would do is click on the sketch and use the map sketch on surface. Now that doesn't seem to work for me. It may work for you, but it seems to crash FreeCAD for me. So what I do is a workaround. Now I've got this mapped sketch here, remembering that this sketch here sits outside. And what I do is go into the map sketch, so I'm in the sketch at the moment, and I carbon copy that sketch into here. Using the carbon copy copies geometry of another sketch, or come up to sketch, sketch geometries, carbon copy. That brings that tool here, and you can see down the bottom it's finding all those sketch edges there. So I just need to click on one of those edges to bring that in. So that's now imported into that sketch. So I'm going to hit escape to bring the mouse pointer back, and you can see we've got all these points here, and I'm just going to hide the underlying sketch. And now when I come out, this should map to the face of this object. So I'm going to hit tasks and close. Now we can see the sketch is sitting there. We can hide that. So this map sketch, that can be hidden. And what we can do is just bring this around and you'll see the pattern that's been added to that face there. And you can see the pattern goes all the way around. It's actually falling off the edge there, but that's fine. We could do some finer adjustments if we so desire. But now I can click on the sketch on surface and just bring this up. And we're looking at the fill extrudes there, which is true, that's fine. Fill faces, I'm going to set that to true. So all those faces will be filled now. There we go, that's the faces filled. And we can add some thickness. So there's the thickness added. And what I'm going to do is offset that by -2. So it actually goes inside now. So that's now inside, and I'm going to remove that from the underlying object so we get a nice pocket for that pattern in there. To do that, I'm going to jump over to the part workbench, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to go to the cut, the one that I want to keep. I want to then go to the one that I want to remove, holding under control, and sketch on surface, and I'm going to repeat the process like we did before. Make a cut in 2 shapes, and there we go, and that's being removed from there and left the pattern behind. You notice that there's a lot of faces on this pattern. That's because we've used an SVG. What we could have done is we had a very basic pattern there, and we could use that to trace that pattern to allow for some much simpler B-splines in there, some much cleaner faces quite easily, and then done the array and then done the cut from there. But for this tutorial, this is far enough to go. If we so decide, we could actually come in to the inside also and unravel this face and place some writing on this face to finish it off, or something within here. We could even start placing stuff along here if we so desire. But this is just a simple tutorial of how to get that sketch around a curved surface and make things like rings, or if you want your logo around a curved surface or some writing around here, this is one way of doing it. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to my site, and also I have a Ko-Fi site. You can actually donate a few pence or a few pounds, dollars, or whatever your currency is, and that's at ko-fi.com/mang0, and there you'll be able to help me fund my site, and all the money that I actually get from any funds will actually get pushed back into the channel. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing. I'll see you next time.